Hi everyone, Ansel here from the Purple Giraffes. And today we are going to discuss, as we always do, what we are struggling with in our business, whether it's loneliness or just not knowing how to get our clients or getting feedback. So my guest for today is Mr. Alastair Wallace. And so please introduce yourself.
Sure. So it's really nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me along today, Ansel. So my name's
Sure.
Alastair Wallace. I'm the CEO and founder of a training company called Brain Food Limited, based here in London, in the UK. So what I specialise in is helping managers through what I call learning that works. So, very practical training to help managers optimize their time, their resources, connect with their people in an authentic way, and to deal with performance and get consistent results.
Oh, that sounds amazing. And do you work only with companies in the UK or do you do international as well?
No, so I worked it out actually, Ansel. So I've trained over 23,000 managers and leaders all across the globe. But yeah, it was quite an
Okay.
expensive counting activity to work that out. So over a 25-year leadership career, it's about 23,000 leaders and managers. But I've worked all over the world. So whilst I'm based in London in the UK, a lot of
Mm.
my clients are in the UK and Europe, but also I've worked in Australia, in South Africa, in Malaysia, in the US, um, all over the place, really. Not the Arctic or Antarctica yet, but pretty much everywhere else. So it's a really broad variety of clients. So it could be luxury retail, like Louis Vuitton or Moet Hennessy, or it could be, small owner managed businesses that are having problems with their sales team or need some help with recruitment. Um, so, very kind of broad range of different
Mm.
types of learning and
Uh,
different types of activity.
Yeah, it must be quite interesting working with so many different industries because you should learn quite a lot. That's why, I love working with coaches because I always learn something. And it always makes me very happy if I can learn something new. So, yeah. So,
Sure, yes, for sure. I mean, when I was in South Africa, I was working at ArcelorMittal out in Saldanha.
mm,
And so they took me to the steel refinery. So I got to see how steel was
oh, that's
poured.
awesome.
We also had a training room that was kind of out in the desert. And so there was the occasional scorpion scuttling across the floor whilst I was training the guys from the steel plant. So again, as you say, you always learn something from each of those different environments. It was a fascinating insight
Mm,
into how products and services are made and delivered. The sorts of things you would never normally see.
yeah. So I would love to know how did your journey start? Is like why did you actually start your company? And
Sure.
we all struggle at the beginning, especially at the beginning. And how did you
Hmm.
handle those obstacles that came, got ahead of you? If that's the right
Yeah.
wording.
Yeah. That's a really great question, I think. And, you know, being an entrepreneur or particularly a solopreneur when you're working for yourself, it can be quite a difficult, challenging, and lonely sometimes
Mm,
way to make your way through life. Initially, I was working in corporate training, so I was a head of learning and development for the AA as part of the Centrica Group in Scotland and the Northeast. And then I moved into consulting and training with big companies like Hemsley Fraser and KPMG. And I just kind of got a bit sick of that corporate culture, I think, Ansel, and, having to deliver other people's training programs that I just thought could be improved, could be made better, using out of date, dry, dusty theories and just cramming, far too much content into the time without really thinking about, what do these managers and leaders really need to make them effective? How can I get under the skin of what is really important for them and is going to help them deliver results day to day, not just entertaining them for a few hours whilst they come along to a training course. How do we make sure this is really transferable learning? And it was through a conversation with one of my colleagues, Australian guy called Jared, who was really inspirational colleague of mine. And he was saying, have you thought about setting up on your own? And I had, and he really helped me overcome the fear of doing that, I think. So that conversation was a real catalyst for me in setting up on my own. Fortunately, because I'd worked in training and consulting for a number of years before I set up on my own, I had a reasonable amount of contacts, so I could do some freelance work for other training companies whilst I established myself.
Yeah.
But that fear, I think, of where the next job is coming from, will it definitely go ahead? Am I going to earn enough money to maintain the lifestyle mortgage, that I need to? I think, that fear never leaves you, really.
Yeah,
It is a
definitely.
constant factor. And that, that's tough, I think, at times, when work is a little bit harder to find, particularly during the pandemic. I went from having a fully booked calendar, Ansel, for the rest of the year. That evaporated overnight because obviously nobody was running group training sessions during a pandemic and nobody was traveling. So, there was a huge panic at my end when all of that work just evaporated. And it was a number of months until people migrated over to hybrid and virtual learning approaches. So that was a really difficult challenge. And even now, there's still a strong desire for people to learn virtually. You keep reading more and more about people being forced to return to the office or requested to return to the office. So face-to-face is definitely back. But there's also still a real desire, I think, for people to learn virtually as well.
Yeah, I think
I'm just not convinced how well that is measured and evaluated. Training by its very nature is quite difficult to measure, which is why my latest program called How to Lead Your Team, I've built all of that in at every stage. So you can clearly see the financial impact, the time impact that learning is having. And so that was a real labor of love for me and kept me busy during the quieter times thinking about that. So I'm just in the process of launching that at the moment. So that's another my next challenge to overcome.
Yeah, there's always something, eh?
Yes, there always is. That's so true.
So I would actually love to know more about this program that you were talking about. I think, as owners or as a manager in any company, whether it's your own company or whether you're working as a senior or a C-suite employee, I believe that everybody is a leader in the company. And I think that, for me, communication is always like the most important thing that there is. But I would love to know more about your program you just spoke about, how it can help, companies as well
Yeah,
as small businesses.
I'd be happy to talk about that. I mean, the program is called How to Lead Your Team. And the problem I was trying to solve, Ansel, is one that, trainers and consultants have wrestled with for decades, probably. And the difficulty with getting managers into a classroom or a meeting room or a conference room for a training course is you've got to take them away from their day job. for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days sometimes, which is really difficult because who's going to manage their team in their absence? So that's the first challenge is, how do you train people in a time efficient way? Because also that means that the group of managers need to be available for the same set of days. The trainer needs to be available for that set of days. And, you need to have a physical location to do it in, which means often people have to then travel, and you've got printing costs and all of these sorts of things. And quite often people come along to group training courses. I'm sure you've done this. I know I have. And you have a nice time, you do some icebreakers, you have a nice lunch, you make all of these commitments, and then you disappear after the training course completes. You go back to work and you just get, you drown in your work, and you never really deploy any of the new skills properly that you've learned on that training. So the return on investment is really poor. The application of that learning tends to be poor. So with How to Lead Your Team, I was really conscious, how do we make this time efficient so people can stay in their business and operation? How do we make it absolutely crystal clear the things that all managers need to be able to do? So I did a lot of research about that, blending over 20 years of experience in some of the biggest and best companies across the world, neuroscience, psychology, global expertise. And also then thinking, how do I do this in bite-sized chunks for people in a practical way, but also including measurement at every point, but not getting people to do pointless kind of academic projects, but real work application challenges. So the How to Lead Your Team program's divided into 12 concise, flexible, and structured modules. They're interactive, they're grounded in reality, and they're pre-recorded so people can access them anytime from their desk, from their home, from their phone,
that's nice.
to suit busy schedules. Yeah, so you can do it at your own pace. I mean, I suggest people do it 1 module a week. So it's a 12-week program.
Okay.
They have accountability coaching sessions with me. So there's 3 coaching sessions with me at the end of each of the chapters. So each chapter is 4 modules, making 12 in total. And then each of those modules has a real work application challenge. So one of the modules is called Becoming a Time Machine, which is my favorite one, which is all about time and priority management. And so I get them to use an impact calculator to calculate, with the 3 actions they're going to deploy, how much physical time and money does that save over 12 months? So I can guarantee to people, you will save at least 200% of your investment cost over 12 months. So not only is it cost neutral, technically, you're going to make a profit by doing this learning because it's going to make you more effective.
Yeah.
And similar types of application challenges are built into each of those 12 modules. So there are modules, as I say, about becoming a time machine, about how to really tune into your team. You were talking about communication there. So we talk about how to gain confidence with the trust equation. We talk about, an influence toolkit to make you write and speak in an influential way, how to do one-to-one check-ins that are flawless and really encourage people, create an environment of psychological safety. We talk about meetings, how to change and influence behavior with specific expert praise and development feedback techniques. We talk delegation, absence reduction, well-being improvements. So there are 3 chapters in there: optimize, connect, and perform. So those 3 key elements of any manager's role. How do we optimize ourselves, our time, and our resources? How do we connect and influence with our people and stakeholders? And chapter 3, how do we get performance working well? So influencing behavior, getting goals guaranteed, and dealing with those sticky HR situations as well. And all of those interspersed with one-to-one coaching sessions with me, so I can just check in with people about their assignments to make sure they're on track, answer any questions, or talk about anything specific that they've got going on in their business at that particular point in time. So we've run the pilot. The pilot, we had between 200 and 600% return on investment. So
wow, that's
fantastic
amazing.
results. Yeah, I was delighted with that. Really, really excited. So yeah, I'm just about to launch it with a client in the NHS here in the UK. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it works in that kind of environment as well. So yeah, it's exciting times, but busy, super busy.
Well, busy is good. Keeps you out of trouble.
Yeah, exactly. That's so true, Ansel. Yeah, especially in January as well, when the weather's a bit glum in the UK. It's good to keep yourself busy, with a project that I'm really motivated for.
Yeah, it brings the sunshine.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, hopefully, anyway.
Yeah, so if you could give advice to, let's say, a small business, medium-sized business, and they've got their clients, but now they want to start growing a team, and then we need to recruit managers or and type of employees like that. What did you recommend is the things that you need to look at when employing a manager, for example?
Okay. So again, that's a really interesting question, because often people tend to jump into recruitment without really thinking about, what do I actually need this person to be able to do?
Yeah.
They just think, oh, I need someone, and they just go and find someone without really thinking, what are the specific skills, competencies, behaviors that I need this person to be able to do. So my first suggestion is think about, what knowledge, what do they need to know? So that could be experience, it could be education, it could be, software that they need to know. What do they need to be able to do? So I always think of this as ing words, ing words. So skills always end in ing. So it could be decision making, it could be planning, it could be communicating, it could be interviewing. So think about the skills they need. So those ing words, what are the skills that you're looking for? And then finally, and most critically, I think, in a small business, what are the behaviors you're looking for? What are the personal attributes? And these are the things you can't really train, Ansel. It's very difficult. So the types of behaviors or the types of personal characteristics that you can't train that would fall into this category might be things like attention to detail. Now, you can't really train people to do that. You can tell them it's important, but some people are naturally really good with attention to detail, and some people aren't. You might want somebody who's got a really positive, customer-focused attitude.
Yeah.
And again, you can train people to smile and use the right language. That is knowledge and skill. But not everyone has that aptitude or behavior. So I always recommend, just briefly, before you do anything else, mapping out, what do I need them to know? Knowledge. What do I need them to be able to do, which is skill? How do I want them to be? What sort of person am I looking for? So knowledge, skills, and behavior. So I would suggest mapping those three things out first of all. And then that can form your criteria for either pre-selection using someone. If you're looking at CVs, it helps you to write any job adverts or role profiles that you need to. It can form your shortlisting criteria as well, and just means that you're then assessing people fairly against the standard that you're looking for. And that extra hour, 90 minutes invested in getting those 3 things super clear at the beginning, you will reap massive benefits for, particularly if you are recruiting somebody on a contracted full-time basis. Recruitment mistakes are very difficult to undo once people have passed probationary periods, and you can pay for those mistakes for many years afterwards. And it's painful for everybody, if you have to go through any kind of dismissal process, disciplinary performance management. A lot of those problems can be avoided by thinking ahead at the recruitment stage.
Yeah, and I think, I was, when I was still in corporate, I worked for a company, and they never wanted to give me a permanent position. They were always like, no, here's your contract, here's your contract. And, at the end of the day, I was almost like a full-time employee because they extended my contract so many times. But I also do understand, the legal part of, so it always makes me confused a little bit, like, if you renew my contract for like 5 or 6 times, why not give a person what do you call it, a permanent position?
Yeah, and lots of countries, if that happens for a certain amount of time, I can't remember what it is in the UK now, it might have changed recently actually, but if you just keep giving someone a temporary contract for a certain length of time, they are considered to be a permanent member of staff.
Okay.
It's covered by legislation now here in the UK, because that was happening a lot, but there's a lot changing in UK employment legislation at the moment, because it's not fair to do that to people, because people want stability. Another thing that I would recommend as well, and this really helps you tune into that third category, which is more difficult to measure with CV and interview, the behavior category, is to consider using a psychometric tool. So I use DISC quite a lot with my clients to help them with recruitment. It just provides a behavioral profile, shows how people might respond under pressure. And that's just an additional piece of data. When I was doing my master's in organizational development, we were looking at the efficacy of different recruitment methods. And interestingly, Ansel, and horrifyingly as well, an unstructured interview, so one where the interviewer is just asking kind of random, unprepared questions, which sadly is what most do, that has the same predictive validity for job success as a handwriting test. So just let that sink in for a minute. If you don't, you have an unstructured interview, you might as well just ask for a sample of their handwriting. It has the same predictive validity for job success.
Yeah, or check their Facebook.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there are so many bad recruitment practices around, because a lot of managers are never trained how to do it properly. And, there is a way to do it. And, the best recruitment involves a range of different activities. This is why assessment centres have been popularised in more recent years, because you're testing several different dimensions rather than just relying on someone's responses to a question. Often it includes a presentation or a work sample or some form of aptitude test as well. So getting several different types of data point is often a much better way. And the research bears this out, is a better way of making a decision that has predictive validity for someone's job success. When you see people saying, "Oh, I've had 5 interviews," just because you've had 5 interviews doesn't necessarily mean any of those interviews were actually any good or provided any data. I've just seen so many horror stories. One of the activities in my program is I give people 10 questions and say, which of these questions is it okay to ask at interview? And people normally pick maybe 3 or 4, and actually all of them technically could end you up in court for
Oh,
discrimination
wow.
in most countries.
Sure.
And they're things as simple as, how old are your children? Questions like that. You've got to be really careful. Or, is English your first language? You've got to be so careful with these sorts of questions because they can be misinterpreted and, can lead to potential discrimination claims from people in lots of countries. So again, that's what I cover in my caution HR
Yeah,
module right at the end of how to lead your team.
sure. I never thought that asking somebody's language can be a problem. So
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
learning a
it's
lot
one of those
today.
things. Yeah, it's one of those things you've just got to be careful about how you present it. So you might say, English is our business language. Is that going to be okay for you? So a question like that is
Oh, so you
fine, but
just
saying to somebody,
phrase it a bit differently.
yeah,
Ah, okay.
exactly that. Yes. And, even questions like, when are you getting married? If that comes up in conversation, those sorts of questions are best avoided because, again,
Yeah.
people could say, well, that's sexual discrimination, or, they were asking me that because they're assuming I'm going to have children,
True.
which means that I'm going to have maternity. And, so questions like that are best avoided, which
Mm.
is why I always suggest to interviewers that you have a list of pre-prepared questions that you ask all of the candidates. Then you're comparing like with like.
Yeah.
If I was interviewing you and I ask you 6 questions and then the next candidate I ask 3 questions, then when I'm comparing the data at the end of the day, it's not a fair
Mm.
comparison because you had 6 opportunities to tell me about your experience and your skills and your knowledge, whereas the other candidate only had 3 opportunities. So you're not comparing like with like.
Yeah.
So I always suggest it's best to have a pre-prepared list and structure for your
Mm.
interviews, just to make sure that you're going to make the best possible decision, because you can pay for that decision for a long time if you get it wrong.
Yeah. And then lastly, so I'm sure you're very excited about your program. Is there
Mhm.
anything else that's coming up this year that you're excited about? Maybe another program or a
Yeah,
nice
well,
holiday?
so I've just got back from 3.5 weeks in Brazil,
Ah,
actually, which was amazing.
that's
So we
awesome.
went to the Amazon jungle um, and stayed in a lodge there and went caiman spotting and piranha fishing and
Sure.
swimming with the river dolphins. So that was really amazing. So I've kind of done my holidays for the time being. What I was thinking, though, and based on the fact that I'm seeing lots of organizations returning to work, so the content for how to lead your team, I spent so long crystallizing it, developing it, and putting it into a digital format so people can consume it as and when they wish.
Mm.
But I'm going to launch, I think, a face-to-face version of this
Okay.
and just see how that flies, and also a online virtual version as well. So we're just looking at lots of different
Mm.
ways that we can get this content out to people, so that that the participants have the choice. We're putting the power back to the managers and the procurers of this learning to say, look, you can do this program any way you want. I can come and deliver it for your people face to face. They can do it over virtual sessions, so we can do it in a short session way. Or if they want, they can just do the online digital version and have check-ins with me one-to-one. So there's
Oh, okay.
lots of different ways for them to do it. So I'm looking forward to kind of getting stuck in and launching all 3 channels of how to lead your team a bit later this year.
Oh, that sounds really awesome. And the more people you help, the the better. Well, for me, I believe that the more people you help, the better the world or organizations and companies and employees can be treated. For me, I'm very about mental health in workplaces, and
Yeah.
and I think that it is so important to educate people. And I think with your program, it feels like it is touching on the like on the, how can I say, not the text but the serious, if that makes sense. I don't know how to explain it. But also like you mentioned, the HR side of things. And I think
Yeah,
people overlook that so many times. Um, and they don't think of, maybe I should actually look after my employee as well. Um,
for sure.
so,
Yes. I mean, I was just looking at the research when I was designing this program. So the Chartered Management Institute show that 82% of managers have never had any formal training in the critical skills of how to lead a team.
oh, well.
Now, if you think about any other job, like if you think about a taxi driver, a nail technician, there's no way that there's going to be 82% of taxi drivers or nail technicians or doctors that have never had any training. So why on earth do we expect people to be able to be managers
Mm,
without being taught? It just doesn't make any sense. And the OECD estimate that poor management costs UK businesses £84 billion every year. So that's an average cost of £35,000 per untrained manager every year in decreased productivity, unnecessary mistakes, rework, wasted time, wasted resources. And 28% of team members leave jobs due to bad relationships with their boss. I know that I have in the past when I've worked in corporates. That was a big reason in me moving jobs when I was working in corporate environments. So it's just such an important thing. And, I want to help people lead teams with confidence, with clarity, with purpose, and, just make sure that we start helping people feel engaged in their career again
yeah,
and engaged with their people.
yeah, definitely. Well, I've been really enjoying talking to you. I think we should get you again, and then we can do maybe a Q&A and get some questions in. I think
Love that.
that'd be a cool idea. Unfortunately,
Sure.
we reached our time, but I would just like to thank you, Alastair, for being part of the program and the series and just sharing your knowledge. I think we all need to learn, and hopefully we all want to learn, and that's how we grow in business and in life. So yeah, I just
Sure.
want to thank you, and also to the listeners. And yeah, I will speak to you guys next week again. Cheers.
Thank you. So, Ansel, thank you so much. And yeah, I'd be happy to come on and do a Q&A, anything about management and leadership, work problems. Yeah, happy to do that at any time. If you want information about my program, it's howtoleadyourteam.com. Thank you for listening. And yeah,